Well, one step at a time. Right now you're in Chicago, and right now we got to deal with China. We got a tariff deal. Pretty exciting. Are you excited about that? Were you at the edge of your seat waiting to see if there was going to be a tariff deal? I imagine you probably couldn't sleep last night.
Well, the market didn't particularly like the tariff deal because S&Ps are down 20 after they're making new lows right now, and as we speak, and the Nasdaq's down 100, and so whatever tariff deal was made, it's clearly not what the market wanted to see, which actually doesn't surprise me that this is starting to backfire a little bit, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I agree, whatever.
I mean, but the sort of the incompetence of the administration, again, just to back up a touch, the underlying assertion that the American labor market has suffered because of the structure of multinational trade, I think, is a fair assertion.
Sure.
And the idea that it's politically valuable and popular to open up a policy discussion about how to change the multinational trade discussion in a way that is somewhat more beneficial, or in some ways it sort of repairs or at least offers a willingness to acknowledge the damage to the American labor market, all strikes me as very reasonable. It's the mechanism. It's sort of like, it's one that if I'm your doctor, I'm like, oh, you've got a broken foot, and that's a reasonable thing. You got a broken foot. But if the way that I heal your broken foot is not by putting a cast on it or by setting the bones, but instead by dipping your foot in a pile of leech water and tell you that if we just stick leeches on your broken foot, that it'll magically heal. It's sort of like that would be an incompetent doctor. Right, so the doctor's competent enough to diagnose the problem, but totally unqualified to offer the solution. Not only do they put your foot in a bucket full of water full of leeches, but they do it in a hyper dramatic way where they announce the leech water with fireworks and a dancing bear. And you're like, why is there a dancing bear and fireworks in a bucket of leeches? I just have a broken foot. And, that would be like, I don't think that's a serious doctor. Like, that's not really a competent doctor. And I think that that's sort of a metaphor that I hold anyway for the way the Trump administration has dealt with the injuries that have been sustained to the American labor market due to some trade policies. And I think that sort of one of the ongoing primary concerns of the Trump administration is very effective identification, maybe one of the best political identifications of some of the core, most acute and politically painful challenges, combined with a tremendously theatrical and incompetent response.
Or distraction. Yeah.
Right, and or whatever. But it's sort of it's used for a show as a showpiece. The point is that the doctor is not acting in a professional manner that's actually taking care of the injury.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
The doctor's exploiting the injury as an opportunity for the doctor to put on a show about how great the doctor is at solving any problem.
Your description or / analogy is much kinder than mine. Mine is the administration's actions are more like they're robbing a bank, and they're robbing a bank in pure day, in daylight, and everybody's watching, but they set off a bunch of fireworks and small little explosions about 4 blocks away. So it takes your attention away from what's happening, and they create chaos, basically chaos on demand. It's part of the whole.
But you interpret it as incidental or strategic.
No, it's strategic. It's strategic by accident. In other words, there's sometimes, if you remember the movie Being There, sometimes we can there's a very thin line between genius and dull. there's the title of today's session was going to be, who's the adult in the room, and which I think is a really good, you can go so many different ways with who's the adult in the room right now in the U.S. And one of the challenges that we have is that, again, there is this incredibly thin line that it's hard to distinguish between, because some people are going to say, oh, this move is genius, and the other ones are going to say they're so dumb that you're mistaking just incredible stupidity for smart, for some kind of genius. But when I look at the whole thing, I have a different take. My take is that they always say you're just the average of the people that you hang around with. Like that's always been.
That's a common truth.
It's common, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. That you're a certain percentage, different.
Your best friend, your wife, your mother, your father,
whatever,
brother, whatever.
There's certain pieces of the relationships that you have that kind of help to define you, right? So when you surround yourself with people that challenge you, you end up in with a very strong company, and you end up with a very strong, if it's government, you end up with a very strong government. It's a strong system. One of the things that's always made America really a special place is that we've always had this system of checks and balances. We've always had the system of everybody challenges everybody. It's why the parliamentary system works. It's why democracy always worked. And because everybody
you might have an adversary who can challenge you in a public way that has a meaningful influence on the path.
That's right. Yeah,
as opposed to a dictator where there's no effective adversary.
Exactly. That's the whole problem in North Korea. That's the whole problem in Russia. That's the whole problem in Syria. That's the whole problem in Afghanistan. You end up with this government in place, and nobody challenges the leader, and the leader who could be, it could be smart, could be stupid, whatever, but he's surrounded himself with people that refuse to challenge them. So there is no check. There's nothing to normalize. There's nothing to keep anybody, there's no way to keep things sane. And so that's never been the issue in the U.S. We've always had, that's why we have a House. That's why we have a Senate. That's why we have every level is to check everybody else off. That's the whole thing. But when everybody is, quote, part of is scared, or part of a cult, or whatever it is, there's no checks. Then
there's no adversary. There's no powerful public adversary.
No, there is none. And in that case, the people you're surrounded by, there's no challenges. And when there's no challenges, you think everything you're doing is great. Hence, one of Trump's biggest issues. He thinks everything he does is great. And if you challenge him, he tries to squash you. That's why, no protesters at my parade. A peaceful protest becomes essentially an insurrection. But an insurrection, if the people are on your side, is not an insurrection. It's a peaceful protest. The lines are completely blurred of right and wrong and all this kind of stuff. So that's where we are right now. Who is the adult in the room? Who checks? If you're relatively incompetent, you surround yourself with relatively incompetent people, then who checks these people? Who checks the RFKs of the world who think that they have, that they're some kind of scientist or doctor when they're idiots? Who checks the idiots? That's what I want to know.
And so obviously the answer is nobody right now.
Right.
Obviously there's going to be a massive adversary next year, because obviously the Democrats are going to take the House next year. But for the next 2 years, there is no adversary. we've been in this. This happens. We've had these 2-year cycles many times, actually.
Yeah,
like this
sure.
is not.
I agree.
Obama had 2 years. He did this. He covered, and he, in my opinion, blew it. Covered up for the banks and all that stuff. But anyway, the thing is, I think we're all learning how dangerous it is even to spend one day, let alone 2 years, with no adversary.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? I mean, that we sort of indulge this, whether it was with Clinton, whether it was with George W., whether it was with Obama, whether it's now it's with Trump a couple times. When you have no adversary, you come into bad policy making. Full stop. I mean, and then you're sort of hoping on the goodwill. Well, maybe the Treasury Secretary, or maybe the Commerce Secretary, or maybe the Secretary of State. I mean, I think that a lot of people right now subtly look to Marco Rubio to answer your question in terms of the topic of today's conversation. Of all the people that are around that administration right now, the person that I see not doing anything, but the one who seems to get the most solicitations, where you'll see like the German prime minister requests private meeting with Marco Rubio to plead his case for rational engagement on tariffs or on immigration or whatever. And again, I think Rubio is the adult in the room, but I don't think he's relevant as an authority. I mean, obviously he's not. But if you ask everybody around the cabinet who's the person you'd want to have a meeting with, who would at least engage with you in a way that would hear you and have a dialogue, it would be him.
Okay. I mean, all right.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
Because he's impotent and incompetent and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, exactly. So what's the risk?
I mean, the risk is really bad economic policy.
And what's the risk of really bad economic policy?
Loss of global economic power for the United States, or a reduction in the value of the currency, and a reduction of value in a reduction of relevance of the American economy. I think that that's the first risk. And then the second risk, I think it's obvious we're going to see increases in social unrest in the cities, particularly in the warm weather month. Like this summer, I think will be continue to be a dynamic and active in the worst possible way. I do think that it's obvious that this is sort of clearly positioning Gavin Newsom as the adversary, right? Gavin Newsom is trying to take advantage of what's happening in California.
He should. To position,
because it was, Pritzker could be an adversary. He'd take a couple shots. He had some stuff, but he doesn't really have the national attention right now. He doesn't have an axe to grind, right? The only person who has an axe to grind right now is Newsom, because of the obvious reason, which is because California is where Trump chose to pick his fight, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess the question is can a sitting governor serve as an effective adversary to a president with a unified government?
Well, I'm not sure how to answer that question, but I can tell you that a sitting governor, especially of California, can clearly win the presidency.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
That goes without saying.
That we know. So yeah, this propels him into the spotlight, and he would be, I think Trump recognizes that he's got to tread carefully, because he doesn't want. Right now, the Democrats are in, there's no clear leader. The party's in disarray. They don't really have a clear, they don't have a clear statement. They have a mission, but they don't really have, they don't have a platform that people understand or can get behind. They have all these issues, and he does not want to give them that person. Like he has to be very careful here that he doesn't do something incredibly stupid to propel Gavin Newsom to that spot, because the challenge he's going to have with Gavin Newsom is, and he knows this, Gavin Newsom is, 3 times smarter than Trump.
Well, he's
I mean,
a
it's not.
pro.
He's a pro.
Capital P pro. I mean, whether you like him or not.
Yeah, whether you like him or not, he's a smooth talker. He's a good-looking guy. He's a smooth talker. He's got his
He's intelligent. He's
super smart.
Very high emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So he's Trump's worst nightmare because he knows he's in mental decline. There's not much he can do. He can't reverse that. He can't keep up with Newsom. So that's a challenge. Like, he thinks he has a physical advantage over Pritzker, which he doesn't, but he thinks he does. And
you mean he thinks he's physically larger, like it's a wrestling match? Is that what you mean?
No, he thinks he can pick on his physical appearance. You know,
he's like, Pritzker's a pork pie. He can insult his appearance, you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, because Pritzker's, Christie was more articulate. Christie had a lot of things, but he was able to get him on the whole weight thing, size of his body, that kind of stuff. And Pritzker has the same issues, but
Gavin Newsom's 6'5" and a male model.
Yeah, right. He's got an issue with Gavin Newsom. Yeah. He can't pull that. He can't pull his, typical stuff. So I think he's got to be very careful here, and I think he knows that, or somebody's told him that. Hopefully,
I'm going to ask you the same question you asked me, which is, what is the real risk of having no adversary for this government for the next, 18 months, 19 months?
I've thought a lot about this because this is what scares me. It, on the one hand, I keep telling myself that America's too strong and America's too big to fail, and we don't need to worry about it. Like, there's certain things we don't need to worry about. But I am probably, over the course of the last week, I'm probably more nervous about this stuff because I do think that, and I can tell from my own feelings.
You're saying the social stuff, you're saying not the financial stuff, but the social dynamics.
Yeah, the social dynamics are, the social dynamics are explosive. The social dynamics, here, it's just, there's when you watch scenes of families being torn apart, there's no way you can say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we're about. There's just no way. It's not we are a country of immigrants. That's what we are. And it doesn't matter how you got here. Everybody has, it's such an easy thing to say, oh, you're here illegally, so it doesn't matter, you're a criminal. That's just simply not, you can't, it's almost impossible to be here any other way than to be here illegally. We don't accept people. Like, when you can't even go through the process because you're going to be detained in that process. There is no process. Like, if you show up to do it the way they want you to, they just arrest you. So there is no process. And the scary thing, is that we cannot have a situation where the only people that are detained and deported are, Black, brown, or Latinx. That's it.
Well, I would say we've gone beyond. I can tell you, because I'm here. So, the front page of the Italian newspaper, not the Italian news websites, because part of my Italian language class is basically reading the Italian newspaper out loud to my teacher, like the finance pages in the newspaper, whatever. So I'm stuck reading Italian news. And the top headline is that they're rounding up Italian citizens in Los Angeles. And that they're basically threatening to. It's not simply your sort of usual suspects from South America and Mexico. That the top headline in Italy is a crisis with the foreign minister in the paper saying that they're concerned that they're going to have to go to Guantanamo to extract Italian citizens who have been rounded up and sent to Guantanamo. I mean, this is a diplomatic catastrophe. I mean, but whatever. It's easy to analyze. This is boring. We know it's terrible. Yeah. So let's assume it spirals, which I think is the meaning. Let's assume it's a summer of protest and chaos. Not just in LA. New York will go. Chicago will go. Some other cities will go. right? But for sure, the heavy immigrant cities like New York, Boston could go, Miami could go, on and on and on. And what is the consequence? Let's assume that, because everybody talks about, the convention in 1968 in Chicago was this apex of sort of political tension in America, and all the sort of legends and realities of what happened in Chicago in the late 60s. Or more recently, the George Floyd situation that just set off a summer. We all know what happened that summer of 2020. It just seems very reasonable that this summer could be a summer of violence and protest. And I just wonder, outside of the obvious fear, which is it's terrible to live in a country that's laden with violence and protest, that you don't need a derivative the derivative outcome of that is interesting, and I want to talk about it. But the primary outcome in and of itself is already a catastrophic failure for the country. But what is your fear about the derivative outcome? Is it an aggressive military state basically to counter it?
No, the derivative outcome is always positive at the end, because the protesters are always the heroes. Whenever it happens. Like there's no such thing as mass protests where the protesters don't come out as the heroes. That's the reason they're protesting, is that eventually, that's the will of the people. And that's not ultimately going to be the issue. It reminds me of, it's been a long time. Well, let's see what ultimately happens here, and maybe they all back off.
It cools off, sure.
Hopefully, it cools off. But I grew up in late '60s, early '70s, and we spent between my grandparents and my parents. I think I was in Washington D.C. at an anti-war rally like twice a month. And there was millions of people there. And, at the time you're thinking, okay, well, at the time I didn't know what was going on, but, at the time you're wondering, at least looking back at it, you're wondering, is this all worth it? And then, 5 years later, not only was it worth it, but it changed the course of, it changed America for the next 30, 40 years, and it turned us into a powerhouse. So, I'm always on the side of the people, and this time it's easy, but I think it ends up with benefits, and it ends up in a good way.
Give me one benefit.
Well, the benefit is that
on the other side.
The benefit is that that the right policies get into place. There's resolution where people that are in the U.S. that you don't have to be a topless model or a Slovenian escort to get a visa in this country. You can be you can be somebody that's been tortured by gangs in El Salvador or Guatemala, and you had to escape, and you walk 1,000 miles, and you get here, and somehow there's legit amnesty, or somehow there's legit citizenship. Plus, we need people, we need workers, and so I think that there's a compromise, and there's a solution, and there's a real policy put in place. So it's not impossible to become a U.S. citizen, but it's also fair. That's the good part.
So you're because remember, the thing that I think about with this a lot is George W. Bush, who, as you know, was very immigration friendly. For setting aside any of the sort of catastrophic war policies and some of those other things that are less appealing, to say the least. The one thing that I always sort of held respect for W for was that I think because of his experience in the Texas culture, Texas ranching. Texas is a border state.
Well, there's no question. If you're a Texas rancher, that's that's where
those are your people.
From. Yeah, those are your people. Yeah,
and W respected that, and W didn't say get these people out of here. W said we need. I forget, he had some word for it. He had some sort of concept around it, but he basically had a way to legitimize or legalize that immigration. And I just want, do you think that that's where this ends up?
Yeah.
So do you think that when this is all said and over, that actually the pendulum swings the other way and it goes away from the chaos of the Biden border, the idiocy of the first Trump wall border, and all the way back to the George W. Bush, John McCain style immigration discussion, which is, this is a country of immigrants. We need rules. These people are important to us, and we need to create a way to legitimize them and keep them. Which I always thought was very rational in 2000 and whenever it was, 4 or something.
Not only is it rational, it's where we're going. It's going to be the solution to all this, and it's the only solution it's the only long-term solution that actually works, is to have a rational plan in place. Right now, there's nothing, and right now it's a PR, it's a marketing plan. That's all it is. It's just PR and marketing to get certain people riled up and to be a distraction to other things. But that is the answer, and there'll be a reasonable, rational solution, and we'll move on from it. The reason this country is so great is because all these people, no matter where they come from, it's all the hardworking people that challenge all the other people here. And that combination of taking a brain drain from everywhere else in the world and challenging everybody else that's here is the most successful combination to drive an economy of anywhere else in the world. Any economy, if you think about it, name a place in the world that is completely closed off to outsiders that works. It does.
Obviously, sure.
But you can go to like an underdeveloped place like North Korea, which obviously doesn't work, it's pure failure. Or you can go to a very advanced country like Japan, and you can say it doesn't work there either. Okay, that's why their economy's been in the doldrums for so long. You can go basically to any place, anywhere in the world, and say, hey, if you have closed borders, you have a crappy ass economy.
Or even if you just sort of incrementally, it doesn't have to be black and white. Like look at Brexit. Like if you just marginally close yourself, it immediately.
Brexit's another example. Brexit, a complete disaster. And when you look at what countries have done that have had isolationist policies, they can't compete. The great thing about America has always been that people challenge people from every different direction, which pushes us to a completely different level and pushes our economic ecosystem so far above anybody else in the world, because it's so diverse, B, people work so hard, okay, and the combination of all that economic activity drives so much wealth. And then comes along a bumbling turd like Trump who doesn't understand any of that and thinks, oh my God, the greatest way to the presidency is just to tell my base, which needs the support of that group that he wants to get rid of, needs them for a capital base and for a employment base, and needs all that, and says we're going to get rid of them because it sounds good. And then turns our own troops against our own people. How insane is that?
And so I'm interested because you're one of the most you're one of the biggest America bulls that we know, and I don't disagree. I'm not.
I am an American bull. I am totally an American bull.
You've been like this from the day I met you, and for good and not without good reason. And I don't just mean because of your personal experience.
Listen. We got bought out by a UK company. I see what's going on in the rest of the world. We're licensed in 17 different countries. I see what goes on everywhere else in the world. Okay, there's nowhere you'd rather be than the United States of America. If you have,
I'm living. I just opened an Italian company 3 days ago, and I immediately regretted it. I was in the meeting.
We tried to buy. Years ago, before you joined us, we tried to buy a Russian company, a development company, and I spent 3 days in St. Petersburg with American law firms negotiating with Russian firm. Myself and the other firm, we were in total agreement. We were friends. We liked each other. The lawyers couldn't agree. The deal fell apart 3 years later. 3 days later, because nobody could agree on anything, on even what the law says. It's impossible to do business in other places in the world. And so you have to be really
Do you know, real guys, I'm sorry, just to give you a brief anecdote of the impossibility, not that that's the point of this discussion, but it is illegal in Italy for an Italian company to invoice another company without first filing the invoice request through a portal with the IRS. So imagine if every time you exchange an invoice with a vendor before you, anyway, it's all designed to make sure nobody does anything new or interesting ever, basically.
That's absolutely incredible. And that is, that's what everybody in the world faces. And that's what countries with closed borders face. And it's a disaster. And unfortunately, in the case right now, who's the adult in the room in America, Trump has surrounded himself with people that the only reason they have the job is because they think like he thinks, which means that they're not too intelligent to start with. So, because you can only surround yourself with people that are like you. And in the end, these policies, they do run a huge risk to our economy.
But that's kind of where I was going, which is you mentioned something that was interesting for me because I've never heard you say it before, which you said for the first time in the last week, you became a little bit more nervous about the potential risks of an ongoing Trump presidency with no adversary for the next 18 months. Why?
Well,
what changed in the last week?
Basically taking it to a certain level of violence. So what
deploying the Marines in our own country?
Of course.
Or overriding the state government to deploy the National Guard.
Well, of course, I don't think there's ever been a situation like that before, where where there's been an override of the state or the governor or whatever. And I think that this has always been, that's where the line has always been drawn. And I think that this is, this is not just showing your teeth. This puts a lot of people in really tough situations. Do you think the Marines want to be involved in street combat with American citizens? No. Do you think the National Guard does? No, not at all. It puts the police in an uncomfortable situation. It puts everybody in a difficult situation. Like, you don't know where you're aligned to, and then ultimately at the end, what's the legacy of all this? It's bad. It's bad, bad, bad. There's no good outcome, Dylan, because at a certain point, you can't. There's no way. They're in too deep to stop anything.
Who? Everybody, you're saying, on every side?
Yeah, sure.
You're saying the government, specifically the federal government.
Well, the federal government right now is in deep, and they've made, this is their platform. They've made their stand, and what's going to change? People that are in this country and that have been here for 20 and 30 years and working and paying taxes and everything else, and they're going to just leave? Never going to happen. So what happens next? This goes on for the next 3 years. How do you end this?
Yeah, nobody knows. I mean, do you hold on to the belief that the financial markets are still pretty immune from even higher levels of social chaos? Is there a point where social chaos is a market?
Yeah, there's a point. There's a point, as we saw in the Vietnam era and all that kind of stuff. There's definitely a point. But at this point, I think that the important thing to note is that the financial markets are not higher because they're validating this kind of behavior. They're not higher because they believe that, they're not higher for anything that's happening right now. The financial markets have hung in there because they believe that this will blow over, that this will be short-lived. That's the whole reason financial markets have been able to hold their level. Now, if this gets super ugly, then I'm concerned. At this point, the financial markets are just saying, hey, you know what? We're not validating you. This is just, it is what it is. Boys will be boys. Have your fun. Get your stuff done. Figure it out, and make everything right.
Do you have any confidence in Besson, Lutnick, Rubio? Is there anybody?
I don't have an opinion. I don't have a strong opinion on Rubio. Scott Besson, I think, is a complete moron. He's probably the dumbest of any Treasury Secretary we've ever had. And Howard Lutnick, to me, is a real surprise because For some,
Because he's Wall Street OG from New York, you would expect more from him.
well, I knew his brother. I didn't know him. And we did business with his brother, and I always liked him before 9/11. And I never knew Howard. And I always thought he was just a tough guy, arrogant but tough, like an egomaniac but tough. But now I listen to him, and I cannot believe how stupid he is. Like it blows my mind. I'm sitting there listening to this guy. I'm like, he is a complete idiot, and it scares me, And I mean, he scares me now because he's so freaking dumb. But Scott Besson's the worst. Rubio, I don't have an opinion. He's probably fine. I don't know.
Anybody else in there that you can even think of that's an adult in the room, or even a potential? Nothing.
No, I don't know anybody else. I don't really, I have a lot of pent up anger, like a lot of other Americans do, that, just what's going on, because I hate to see, you don't like to see your country burning type of thing. And, and I feel like there's just, in the world of finance, I think we all kind of get along regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. Like, I know with our own customers and stuff, listen, half our customers don't agree with me. Okay, fine. And half agree with me. But I'm totally fine with that because I'm okay with open political discourse. Listen, half my friends think differently than me. I'm okay with that too. And they're always going to be my friends, and they're always going to be our customers. And I always feel I'm going to treat everybody the exact same, always have, always will. I'll do whatever it takes for any single person. I think we can get by this in the world of finance. I don't know if the rest of the world can get by. The rest of the country can get by.
Well, it's interesting. Listen, to see it on the front of the Italian papers, not just as an observer, like, oh, America's got social some unrest in LA, but rather through the Italian lens that Italians in America have been roped up inside of this mess. It's become a domestic issue in Italy, which you would never imagine. You would never imagine the front page in Milan is Italian at risk due to Trump's policies in Los Angeles.
Well, but the other thing is,
it's bigger than America, is my point.
The American dollar, Americans spend a lot of money in Italy. It's got to be, I think I read,
number one customer.
Yeah, exactly. Number one customer in the whole world. And, it puts everybody in a tough position. We're the number one customer in a lot of places. And so,
in any place we go, France, Spain,
anywhere, Greece, you name it,
Greece,
and it does make things a little less comfortable for everybody. That's the sad part.
Markets will not care until they care. It's pointless to speculate about when markets care, I guess is my point. Like, it's a fool's errand to sit around and be like, oh, well, if this happens, then it'll be bad. Or if this happens, you'll never
absolutely know. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. The thing that's holding, I feel like the markets have, over the years have become, they've gotten very, I'm not going to say they're immune to volatility, but they've been very accepting of, different situations like this. So I think the markets they're able to recognize that all this chatter.
They're tolerant and resilient. And
tolerant's the word I wanted. Yeah. Anyway, good discussion, Dylan.
Don't lose faith. We got Marco Rubio is going to save the day, Tom. You can take that to bed tonight. You can sleep well knowing Marco Rubio is on the job.
Well, 1 week from today, we'll be in Europe, and in about a week and a half, we'll be in Milan. So I'm really looking forward to that, and I will be brushing up.
As are we.
Duolingo.
Get your arrivederci going. Your buongiorno.
Yeah,
right there.
Yes.
And no cappuccino after 12 o'clock.
Surprisingly, I've never had a problem ordering food in Italy.
Who would have thought? Who
Who would have thought? I've mastered the art of getting what I want in Italy, so I think I'll be just fine.
Point and shoot, baby. Point and shoot. This is.
We'll see you next week. We will have a truth or skepticism next week, so we'll see you next week, Dylan.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right. See you then. All right. Bye.